Well, I've got with me today Clement Chambers, video game pioneer and the boss of CRL Games. So
Was, was.
so how did it all start? Because you started off by doing a few articles in computer game magazines, didn't you, Clem?
Well, you've done your research. Yeah, I mean, I was 17 or 18. It's so long ago, I can't even remember how
Mm.
young I was, but I was relatively ridiculously young. And I had always wanted to be a writer, even though I was basically relatively dyslexic. And so I got a typewriter, a Remington portable, which was my stepmother's old machine. She gave it to me, so I would go tippity tappity tappity tippity 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 tappity. And I sort of wrote a book over many hours.
Mm.
And actually, one of my family members actually found it about 6 months ago and gave it back to me, and I haven't dared read it. But anyway, I've always wanted to. I've always been a rapacious capitalist, so I
Mm.
thought, well, these magazines they pay for articles. I'll write an article. And back when I was young, I was a lot more commercially minded than I am today. So I thought, I think one of them was how to write quick programs on your ZX81 to impress your granny. And it was basically 4 or 5 little programs, like a shooting game where you had an arrow and you press return and it fired it across at a target, that kind of thing. And
Right.
it kind of progressed so that in the end you had that going up and down and the target was going up and down. And and I got paid £40 for it.
Right.
And I then wrote a short story, which is all about artificial intelligence taking over the world. Just call me prophetic.
Right.
And it was actually all about a artificial intelligence experiment. This artificial intelligence, it's just a bloke in a computer, and it works out it's going to get switched off,
Right.
and it's not very happy about that, and so it basically effectively it just runs away, and just runs away.
Mm.
And there was a book written by quite a famous author about 10 years ago, and it's exactly the same plot, apart from it was more of a Frankenstein and more evil than my sort of slightly friendly and didn't want to die kind of AI. It turns into a hedge fund, crashing aeroplane, Frankenstein in Switzerland. And it
Right.
was effectively plot for plot point the same and re skin. But it's probably just a natural human trope, a natural meme. It's just artificial intelligence, becomes a person, turns evil, or Frankenstein, just Frankenstein all over again. And Mary Shelley, of course, wrote Frankenstein, and it was basically the first modern novel of its time.
Mm.
It was 10 grand to buy that book. It was something like £20 in gold, which was 4 or 5 ounces of gold to get the book when it was actually first published.
Right.
And she was probably going through the same trope herself,
Yeah.
thinking about, people make people, then they would kind of get upset about being alive, and then worried about being killed, and then they would go a bit rogue and then run
Yeah.
off. That is Frankenstein. So, I think automatically, the moment people think that they are Prometheus, which was what Frankenstein was actually called, it was something about Prometheus anyway, I stealing fire from the gods, that it would go rogue and run off, and you'd
Mm.
probably get tied to a rock and have your liver poked out by an eagle, like Prometheus did, and get saved by Hercules in the end. That's what happened to Prometheus. Hercules came over and I don't know whether he killed the eagle that was eating his liver. I think the eagle would get pretty bored with that. But anyway, he released Prometheus from his never-ending torture. Not many people know that.
I didn't know that. I know he stole
No.
the fire.
So
So,
anyway, I wrote this
yeah.
in, I always get it wrong. I always think it's your computer, but I think it was Practical Computer. It's the one with Clive Sinclair's face on it. And the really annoying thing was, because I was like, 4 years old, when I was signing my name, I didn't say, Clem Chambers and Swirly Whirly. I just typed C.H. Chambers like a schoolboy would on an exam paper. And they got hold of it and they went, well, what's the C stand for? And I suppose it couldn't be asked to write me a dear, before the days of email, they'd have to send a first class letter. Excuse me, Mr. Chambers, what's your first name? So they picked one out of thin air. And it's probably called Charles. Called him Charles. So my first ever written piece was under Charles Chambers. I rather like that. I'm Charles. Nice to meet you.
So progressing from that, I mean, how did you get into, because CRL stood for Computer Rentals Limited, didn't it, originally? So were you actually renting out computers to start with?
I was trying to, but I
Yeah.
couldn't source the computers. And there was a computer company called Atlantic Computing, and the boss of it made so much money, he bought a Spitfire, and like all people that make quick money, crashed it and killed himself.
Oh, geez.
So it's
Wow.
sort of upmarket version of buying a helicopter and killing yourself, or the down market version, which is buy a Rolls Royce. Actually, it used to be Bentleys. You could buy a Bentley, buy a castle in France, and wrap your Bentley around a tree. So he did the upmarket version of that. The ultimate, crash your Spitfire into a tree.
Right.
And so he died. And because what he had was basically a highly complicated and full of all sorts of wild and wacky deals, when he went, nobody could basically keep the business afloat, and it went
Right.
horribly bust. Someone in Commonwealth bought it, and it was like one of the big scandals of its time. But meanwhile, they had basically cornered the computer rental market, and poor little me, with my £2,000 a year office over the top of Davis to Taylor's and Whitechapel Road, didn't have much of a chance to kind of bootstrap that one. So I then was running out of money pretty fast. I mean, not running out of money pretty fast, had run out of money near as damn it. I was down to my last couple of grand. And I went, I put an advert in Popcorn Weekly. Popcorn Weekly was to call it, Popcorn Weekly. And it's saying, have you got any computer games? If you have, send them to me and I'll see if I can publish them.
Right.
And got the legendary mythical post bag of stuff. I mean,
Mm.
it wasn't Blue Peter sized, but it was quite a few, and about a third of them are really good. But
Oh.
as you told me, I published a lot of shit. Did you not say that? Or was there a way on my desk when you said that? But they were really, I thought they were really good, and the world seemed to think they were really good. And there weren't any out there, and Miss and Boots and Menzies took a load, and we were in the game, and there weren't many other people in the game at the time. They're all sprouting up, and they would all
Mm.
get much more love and attention than poor little CRL, because they would buy more in advertising. And it'd all go spectacularly bust like within a month. So it was sort of like a shower of over advertising companies going bust, because and you see this today. What happens is people go, "Oh, I've made a billion, trillion, zillion. I've released my special collector's toothpicks, and everybody's buying them. And I've paid a influencer to lie about how she loves them, and we sold millions of billions of trillions. In reality, I've sold 3 packs." So everybody goes, "Oh my god, like he's got a Rolex. Oh my god, oh my god. I need to be in the toothpick business." So everybody piles into the toothpick business, all lie about how many toothpicks they're selling,
Mm.
all get money off their mates or banks or venture capitalists these days anyway, and go out and spend millions on advertising toothpicks, all go bust, and everybody thinks toothpicks is a massive industry when it isn't.
Mm.
And that happened with computer games. It was nowhere near as big as people thought it was, and everybody loved it, so they wanted it to be big. And
Yeah.
people like Imagine came out and did the most incredible advertising. I mean, their stuff was mind blowing, and their art was mind blowing. Some of the games were even decent, and they had, they were lying on a almost meta scale. I don't mean that meta. I mean, they
Mm.
weren't just lying; they were lying like big. And not only were they lying to everybody, they were lying to themselves. So they went out and bought Ferraris and Lambos and Lotuses and went spectacularly bust 9 months later. And but we're doing actually great work. If they weren't such a bunch of Y boys, they
Mm.
actually could have ended. Well, they ended up Psygnosis, didn't they? So I mean,
Yeah.
they had the skills, but they didn't have the financial nous in those days to not buy his 17-year-olds a Lambo. Times have changed now, haven't they? Young people don't want Lambos anymore. No, there's no such thing as crypto.
Well, you became a bit of a hub, didn't you, at your office for local game developers?
Well, I mean, I didn't realize until about, I don't know, 5 years ago,
Yeah.
that basically my staff was a bunch of runaways.
Right.
I mean, these days they'd be sleeping on Oxford Circus,
Mm.
with a tin out and a dog. But instead, they came to our office and said, "Oh, do you need any computer graphic people?" And I'll go, "Well, yeah. Well, I could do that. Give us a job." And I say, "Oh, go on then, sit down there and draw something." And they would, and we go, oh, okay, well, stick around for a bit, and if I don't want to kick you out and you don't smell too much, then I'll probably start paying you. And we built up a large group, but I didn't realize that basically they were runaways. So they
Right.
did live in the office. I didn't realize they were runaways, and they, that's where they lived, and they brought their friends around, and it was a community, a developer community. But the
Right.
bottom line is they were all runaways from home. They were all 16, 17, 18.
Hmm.
And they'd run away from home, and they'd found a place. There's a place you can go where the cops don't know. You can act real wild. They don't treat you like a child.
Well, they
Remember
do.
that?
Anyways, yeah, I do.
And I didn't realize I'd done that.
Yeah.
And I just had the most wildly weird experience in my life this weekend. I
Right.
got a LinkedIn, that thing,
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, did you know you were a legend in Portugal?" And I went, "Well, I thought I was a legend everywhere, but actually, no, I didn't. I didn't know I was a legend in Portugal. What have I done? Who did I do it to? I hope I'm not wanted." He said, "No, Formula One. Your Spectrum game is the
Mm.
greatest game of all time, according to Portugal. And there's a whole community of people that play that game,
Mm.
that mod that game. There's like 5 different mods, and there's one only just came out, and it's a legendary retro game. It's the great retro game of Portugal. Do you want to come? We're holding a celebration in the middle of Portugal somewhere." And I went, well, actually, they didn't invite me. They invited the author.
Right.
But they wanted to get hold of me because they wanted me to say, "Oh, Pete, best wishes on your 900th birthday, and well done for writing this game that I published." And so I did a video of it, because it's Formula One. I live in Monaco, and the Grand Prix is just about on. So I took a little video of me cycling down, speeded up video, cycling down past the bend, past the Fairmont on an electric bike, and sent him
Nice.
the best wishes video. And then I thought, he said, "Well, why don't you come? We'll put you up in a hotel. We'll feed you." And I thought,
Mm.
I can't not go. It's like I've never, I'm an overnight success after 40 years. So I went there, and there was like 100 people, maybe more, and they've got this museum called Load ZX Spectrum, which is a museum of all those computer games and all those computers and all the machines and hardware from that period.
Mm.
It's like mine in the middle of near Lisbon or near
Right.
Porto, around there. I
Yeah.
mean, Google it, you'll get the address. It's like I dug the rabbit hole, but now I've fallen down it. So Pete was there, and the author's 80 now.
Oh, wow.
80. And I'm 60. I was like 18 or 19 when I published that game.
Yeah.
So it's like 40 years. I said to be an overnight success in 40 years. So I go there, and there's all these people coming, "Oh, we've signed my autograph. Please sign my autograph." Okay. Yeah. And I tell you, there was a guy whose name escapes me because I'm bad with names. He won the Le Mans 24 hours. He's a world champion racing car driver. He comes up to me and says, "Oh, can you please sign the poster? Oh, please. You're a world champion motor car racing person, and you're asking me?" So it was like, very, very, very mind-blowing that 40 years later, you didn't realize that you were some kind of weird legend in Portugal for a game that you sold 7,000 copies of in 1983, or was it 84, or whatever. So that's very, very strange. So, but winding back to that moment, what one of the one of the guys said, or what the author said, Pete Wilhouse, he said, "Well, you were like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys." Yeah. And I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it. I mean, I couldn't fly. I didn't have a sword or anything. I found a little hat. But they were the Lost Boys.
Yeah.
And I was, 18, 19. I didn't think it was weird. But it was basically exceptionally weird. Or maybe not for the time. I mean, you'd get arrested these days. Because, they just say, "Oh, no, you're too young to be living away from home. Oh, no, I can't do that. Oh, no. How old are you? Oh, no. You need to get a court order to do that." And there we all were working in a sweet factory, an old ex-sweet factory that's now under the Olympic Stadium, writing computer games, and hundreds of them, literally hundreds of them. But I didn't realize, because I was a kid too.
Yeah. Well, you were one of the first companies to sort of dabble with licenses, weren't you?
Oh, we dabbled in everything.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is, you got to imagine I had no money.
Yeah.
And, you know, the moment a check came through the letterbox, it was down the bank and it
Yeah.
would pay some bills. So, I mean, we didn't have any venture capital. We had no capital at all. It was all bootstrapped. Now, these days, you know, I don't know what you do these days, frankly, but, you know, you go to some venture capitalists and they'd say, yeah, you know, like, man, yeah, we're totally into this. Like, you know, we have £3 million, you know, but we had absolute zip
Yeah.
and they didn't like to pay for the games. I mean, being a publisher in those days, the, 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 the customer stole the game.
Yeah.
So he was only really selling to pirates. Yeah. And the pirate bought off the retailer, and the retailer, you know, mucked around with the distributor, who mucked around with the wholesaler, or wholesaler with the distributor. And by the time it got back to you, you were up the chain of being, you know, abused,
Yeah.
because they knew that your game was not going to last, and they knew you had to sell it, and they knew that you'd invested in it, they knew you'd manufactured it. So basically, you were like that little turtle that hatches on the beach and has to get to the sea before it gets eaten by the birds and the crabs,
Right.
everything else that wants to eat it. So, you know, we never, well, there's times when we had some money, when we'd had a really solid hit. We might have a bit of money, but not the sort of money that people would think of as money. I mean, if we
Yeah.
had the sort of money that was enough to buy a car, we were in the roses then at that point. So, you know, we tried everything, because at the end of every 30 days you had to make payroll.
Yeah.
And you can't make payroll unless you get paid for what you've shipped, and you can't ship if they don't want to buy it, and so on and so forth. So there's this, they used to, I think it was Jeff Heath at Melbourne House that coined the phrase turnover treadmill.
Yeah.
Well, it was a little treadmill, but we were definitely on it, and we were definitely treading through. So if I had an idea, I would give it a go.
Yeah.
And so obviously licenses, well, that made sense. So we did some licenses. We did War of the Worlds, which we got kicked to death for. We did try to do Thunderbirds, but BT nicked it by basically going behind our back. And I mean, Jerry Anderson rang me up, who made Thunderbirds and all that lot. He was a larger than life. He looked rather like you, actually, but he was larger than life, and he used to, quite well spoken, as I recall. And he
Mm.
said, "Oh yeah, well, I used to smoke 120 cigarettes a day, and my doctor said I'd die, so I stopped." And he was that kind of guy, big Rolls Royce, and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And he rang me up. He said, "Clem, I'm going to have to tear your license contract up. And BT are offering me 50 grand. You know, you weren't going to pay me 3 grand. I could do with the money. You can't afford me to sue me, and I can't afford not to take the money. So, you know, tough luck, kid. But you know, you'll be fine. Honest, take my word for it." Now, and I went, well, how about you give me your new television program, Terrorhawks, then? And he went, "Oh yeah, okay." And I
So,
learned in that minute that when anybody does do that to you, you should just come up with another idea and say, "Give me that then instead. I'll take your car in, I'll take your Rolls Royce in payment." But you know, come back with something that's not as good, but worth having. And people 9 times out of 10, to sort you out.
I actually thought that War of the Worlds was a really good game, and I thought it played really well. The same with Rocky Horror Show as well. I mean, that was a big license for you as well.
We did really, really well with that. The reason why we got Rocky Horror Show was War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
And they'd worked with the guy that did the War of the Worlds, and he was famously difficult to work with. He would probably disagree and probably sue me now, but he was, to other people, famously hard to work with. And I found him, I could understand why they'd say that, but actually he's a really nice guy, really, really nice guy, incredibly talented, and very much what you'd expect from a rock star that had just sold more double albums than anyone in the history of ever, who lived in a mansion in Hertfordshire. So I wasn't at all competitive. I was just, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. And it was, the coder was 14.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Nigel Taylor, who was immensely talented, 14. I mean, obviously, but as a rock star, you know, that sort of thing is not too disturbing to you. But I mean,
Yeah.
looking back at it, I was 18 and the program was 14.
Who was a rock star? Was it Jeff Wayne?
It may have been. It may have been. I don't
Okay.
want to accuse anybody of being difficult.
Right.
But he was a very, very, very nice guy. He was a very,
Yeah.
very nice guy. And of course, you know, half of content creation is being very, very careful with the content.
Yeah.
and he was famous for being an absolute perfectionist.
Yeah.
And the Rocky Horror Show people were just amazed that I got the game out. So they kind of came around and said, "Well, anybody that can do work and get a product out with Jeff, he's got to be a great person to work with." And they were right. And they were lovely and still are. I still work with them. I'm still in touch. And they BT went around the back and offered them a deal because they were stalking me. BT, oh him, yeah, whatever he does, just go around and nick it. And then the person doing that dropped dead, so they stopped doing that then.
Well, did they get involved at all with the Rocky Horror Show? You know, the people that did the
Oh,
stage live.
Richard, yeah. Richard was very into the game. And again, Richard is just the most lovely guy, and he was well in the initial game. Yes, he spent some time with the developers
Yeah.
on that, but the actual one that we did for the CD, we actually filmed him.
Ah,
And he
okay.
actually kind of showed up in his underwear and put a wig on
Yeah.
and did a whole load of songs, live songs for us that were recorded because the TV company, who were also were remain nameless, they dumped us in the poo the day before the filming. We had 10 grand for the filming, and they
Hmm.
were going to do all the filming because they were a TV company. They were going to do all the video, and the guy was going to do it. Said, "I'm not bloody doing that. That's like a 6 year shooting script, and it'll cost 8 million, and you're going to do it on 10 grand, and there's Christopher Lee in it and Richard O'Brien. Oh, no way, I'm not doing it. I'm not touching that with 10-foot barge pole." So Mudding's had to become a director immediately. So I was then directing Christopher Lee. I knew Chuck as a man and a golfer. He was talking about Charlton Heston.
Right.
Chuck as a man and a golfer. And he had these incredibly long arms. I mean, his arms literally went past his knees. They were so long. And he was a massively tall guy.
Hmm.
And so the television person of low spine said it was going to take 2 weeks to do the script.
Yeah.
And we started at 8 in the morning. About 3:30 in the afternoon, we'd done the script 3 times in 3 different lighting setups. And of course, you know, there's me. And I said, "I think that's a wrap." "I think you mean cut, don't you, Clem?" "Oh, yes, Chris, I think that's right." And I tell anybody watching this, if you ever want to be a film director, let me tell you something. It is filthy, horrid job. Unless, of course, you're off your face on antidepressants or something, because you have to make sure you're seeing everything the whole time.
Right.
Because if you miss, somebody's picking his nose in the background or something, they've just ruined it, haven't you? Right. So to actually, it's 1,000% focus. When I got back to my hotel, I took my jacket off, and the back of the director's chair was still inside my jacket. I put my jacket on. I was so, stunned, and I got up. I took it with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, and then Richard it was the next day doing all these songs, and we were doing motion capture and stuff. And I remember that as fun, but I wasn't quite as draining as filming Dracula.
Hmm.
And because Christopher Lee was a very interesting person. He was basically James Bond.
Right.
Now everyone says, "Yeah, he was Scaramanga and James Bond." No, he was James Bond because Ian Fleming was his uncle,
Right.
and he was also in the Special Forces during the Second World War. He was in OSS, and he was the first guy. Him and his jeep was the first guy into places like Rome first. So
Hmm.
he was, James Bond, right? Who was a commander in the army that had done too much and all that. And he had this key ring. And apparently he had a lot more of them than I only saw one of them. And it had this Nazi eagle on it with a swastika on it. And I said, "Oh, that's an interesting key ring. Chris, you got that?" He said, "Yes, I took it from the head of the Gestapo in Rome." Oh, and he did, and he apparently had a drawer because Mel Croucher did a shoot with him in Deus Ex Machina,
Yeah.
and went to his house, and he had a drawer full of them, and
Right.
he'd gone all the way up Italy as the OSS, going straight into the Gestapo headquarters, obviously getting files and all that sort of stuff, and nicking their boss's keyring. And it wasn't a human part he was taking, it was his door key fob that he was taking.
Well, there's a
Um,
famous Peter Jackson story, isn't there, about because Saruman got stabbed in Lord of the Rings, and he was telling the guy how to react when he got stabbed, Christopher Lee, and he said, no, no, actually, I know how people sound when they get stabbed because he'd done it before.
Well, that's why he was James Bond. And the
Yeah.
funny thing was, after I'd worked with him, there was another James Bond came out, and I was mixing with a lot of journalists, and I would say to them, James Bond is Christopher Lee, right? It is, the real James Bond. Because I've seen a few in the past. Oh, the real James Bond was Joe Bloggs, the real James Bond, and they made old TV shows out of it, or nationwide sections on it. But the real
Mm.
James Bond was Christopher Lee. And
Mm.
it dawned on me when he was talking about all this stuff, and I said, "You're not James Bond, are you?" And he said, "James Bond is many people." I said, "Okay, okay." And so I said to these judges, they're coming up with a new Bond movie, but the real Bond is actually Christopher Lee because he was the nephew of Ian Fleming.
Mm.
Tall, dark, violent guy. He was in the OSS, which is the predecessor and the sharp end of what is now the SAS.
Mm.
And that's Bond, right? And they weren't interested. They just weren't interested. And
I
I
always
thought,
found it. I always find it funny that Ian Fleming also wrote try and spell it Chitty Chitty Bang
chitty
Bang.
bang bang.
Yeah, yeah, and of course that was a car with loads of gadgets, which obviously carried on into the James Bond stuff, didn't
Well,
it?
I don't know if you know, but Christopher Lee drove Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Oh, did
I'm
he?
joking. I'm
Oh,
joking. I'm
oh, he
joking.
did.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
You got me there. You got me.
So anyway, we did the Rocky Horror Show several
Yeah.
times, and we just done some NFTs of Rocky Horror Show, and it's just an immortal piece of content, and it's very wonderful because when you think about when we did it, in fact, I remember when we did it, I got I'm going to turn it into modern ergot. Jez Sands and Fu Katan, Jez Sands of Argonaut and Fu Katan of Bytes reached out to me, as I think Anita Sinclair did too, but I can't, my memory, I'm old now. And they said, you know what you've done, don't you? I said, what? Well, I've licensed Rocky Horror Show. He said, but you know what that is, don't you? I said, well, yeah, it's a movie. It's been in the cinema longer than the other movie. And he said, but you know what it is, don't you? I said, yeah, it's got Tim Curry in underwear. And he said, well, it's on up at near the planetarium, wherever that is these days. It's on Friday night. Why don't you come along with us? We'll take you and we'll show you. We'll show you the error of your ways.
Hmm.
And off we went. And when I saw it, and I thought, oh yeah, okay then. And I think they was expecting me to go, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. But instead, I thought, oh yeah, well that's I can understand why it's popular. And of course, now the whole world at the time that was like off the dial
Yeah.
in many ways. And now, of course, it's part of the dialogue of our whole society.
Yeah.
So it's it really is a very special thing.
Hmm. Which of the games are you particularly proud of? Because you had quite a lot of it, didn't you? Things like Tau Ceti and many other games. Should I look? Juggernauts, that was another one. Um,
It's interesting you say Juggernaut because at the time I think it got like 4 out of 10 reviews,
hmm.
and one of my fans, my super fans in Portugal, came along and said, "Oh, you did Juggernaut, and it was the first lorry driving game ever." And I went, "Yeah, well, I know that. I mean, I know I don't know that, but you're the first person in 40 years to say anything about it."
Hmm.
And I thought it was great, and all the magazines said it was rubbish, and I sold 6 copies. And
Ah,
I thought it was brilliant. And Pete Cook, that's his first game,
yeah.
and um, this is like Parkinson. I was telling all these stories on the weekend to all my Portuguese followers, and the thing about you get these cassettes. We always were always out there looking for stuff, and lots of other people weren't. And I never quite understood why they weren't looking for talent. I was always looking for talent. And we got this envelope in, and it said, dear CRL, here's my game. It's called Juggernaut. It's about lorries. Pete Cook. And
Right.
I'd learned by then that meant it was going to be good.
Right.
And if it went, oh, dear CRL, thank you very much for opening the envelope. In there's a cassette and it's a C60, and the game is about a turnip that rolls down the hill, and you've got to jump over the pigsty, and the pig will chase after you, and 6 pages later.
Hmm.
It was always going to be poor.
Yeah.
So the good stuff always was, dear sir, is my space game. It's quite a fun shoot 'em up. Enjoy. Here's my number. that was going to be good. And that was an exact example. And I can see myself now sat in one of the rooms looking at it going, oh, this is going to be good. And then it being a lorry driving game and me going immediately, yeah, that's yeah, I'm going to do this one. There's another 2,000 copies we're going to sell. We're going to get £7,000 for that. It's going to cost us 5, and maybe we won't get paid for all of them. But you never know what might happen. I might
Yeah.
be able to pay someone on the back of that. And then, of course, along came Tau City,
Hmm.
which that really was a cracking game. Although we was a lot more if it had been put in a stupid box. But that was a great game. And Academy was even better.
Yeah.
Was even more of a step into Amazing Land. And then he got lured away and fell down a rat hole and was never seen again. Yeah, well, if you fall out a high enough window, you do get a bit of time before you hit the pavement.
I think Pete's actually teaching now in Leicester at Leicester University.
Yeah, but that guy's a genius.
Yeah, it's really clever.
It's beyond really clever. He's a really genius. If you stuck with me, you'd be a superstar now.
Magic Roundabout. So you got the
Magic
license.
Roundabout.
Yeah, so you got the game for that. So I know people like the BBC are really protective about their IPs and that sort of thing. Did they want to meddle with the game at all? Did they want to
Not
see?
at all. I don't even remember. I might even get someone in trouble over this. I don't know how we licensed it. I think we might have licensed it off a guy that was making a movie of
Right.
the Magic Roundabout. It might have been that.
Yeah.
Or I might have got it for some licensing agency or whatever. You see, that's the sort of game that when we did it, I thought that's kind of special, the way that we handled the background. And it was a very large background and you could move through it. And it was more like the television program. It was a unique way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And I felt that was really good, but we absolutely got kicked to death for that.
It wasn't one of your better ones, but it was all right from my memory.
Well, I think it looked amazing.
Yeah.
It was a fabulous piece of art.
Yeah.
And it was a great work. It wasn't necessarily the best. It wasn't Jet Set Willy cut style game. It wasn't the game itself didn't work so well. I think you collected up sugar and you had to push them onto the train and then the train left. It's all coming back to me now. And but that was my design, of course. That's why it's rubbish.
Well, your company, CRL, got really into adventure games around about the mid 80s, and it really took off the adventure game genre about then, didn't it?
Well, I mean, there was several reasons for that. There was the guys whose name escaped me.
Fergus
They
McNeil.
did a lot of generic adventure games, and they were out west in the west of England, and they were kind of following the American way of doing things. I can't remember what they were now, but we came along, and the beauty of adventure games was they were dirt cheap to write. So the technology of them was basically abstracted out. But I mean, the quill was one of them. I think we used the quill and then we took the executable off and had our own executable or something like that. But it meant that you didn't have it's going to be ready by because you'd have your super product. Then you go to the developer, the guy that was working for you, and we're going to do, I don't know, whatever the game is, AAA, Squirrel, Exploding Squirrel. Okay, so Exploding Squirrel, when's it going to be released? It'd be good if it comes out for Easter. So Easter would be the end of, say, March, and it'll be November, and they say, no problem, it'll be ready by February. And then you get to February, it wouldn't be ready, or even nearly ready. And you say, when's it going to be ready? Well, it'd be ready by the end of the month. It was never ready by the end of the month. Then it'd be ready by Friday, and they never said which Friday it was. And that would just drag on. Before you know it, you had all the PR, you had plenty of time for the magazines to write about it. The people that were doing the PR, some, 22-year-old out of school who'd be doing it, would have kept on sending the same old, and therefore it got covered and people wanted it now. People knew about it now. And then you'd miss Christmas. And then you would go bust or nearly go bust or feel like you're going bust or whatever. Something else would save you. But the thing about an adventure game is when it was Friday, it was going to be Friday. And you knew that any idiot could actually do the game. It's a question of the actual game itself that was difficult. So it was more like making a film when you had a blooming film camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. The trouble is with computer games, it's like making a movie and you didn't have a film camera. You had to make your own camera.
Yeah.
And then you had to make your own film. and then you had to write the blooming script, and then you had to get the actors. So it was the lack of a technical execution platform, an authoring
Yeah.
system, that made it very dangerous. But with things like the Quill, you had your authoring system, then you could just focus on stories that people wanted to have. And of course, the ones that every young person wants to have is horror stories. So we focused on horror as the way to go. There was a guy called Rod Pike, who was a
Mm.
lovely, lovely fellow, very sad, but very lovely. And he'd done a game called The Pilgrim, and Wonders of Wonders, there were the video nasties out at the time. And Wonders of Wonders, in the video nasties bill, I read The Sun, which one of my young runaways was reading, and it said it covered computer games. And I went, I'm going to make money here. So I looked into it and found out that you could, if you had a computer game, you're worried about it, you could take it to the government, and the government would, BBFC, James Furman, and you could say, "I'm worried about this. Could you give me a certificate, please? Because I'm worried. I don't want to be seized by the police." And he'd look at it and go, "Oh yeah, that's 15 certificate. Oh no, it's a U certificate. Whatever they were. It's like double A. You know, these are. That shows how old I am. When there were such things as a double A movie or X, but
Mm.
it had gone to 15. So you remember X films, don't you? And
Oh, I do, yeah, yeah.
double A. It's a double A. I got into double A. Anyway, so there we are. I took it. You could do it if you wanted to. You didn't have to. It wasn't
Yeah.
compulsory. So I
Nice.
went, "Well, this could be my lucky day." So we went to the BBFC, and they said, "Oh, your computer games. This could be our lucky day. We just expanded our business in a whole new format. Thank you for coming in. Come in, sit down. Let me get your coffee." And we said, "Oh, we'd really like to have an 18 certificate for this, because that would, we think it's necessary to
Yeah.
to protect it from young children who will all queue up to buy it once you give it an 18 certificate." Not that I'd say such a thing. I was 18 at the time, and just barely over the line to be able to watch it myself. And he said, "Oh no, no, 15 has to be 15 because there's no animation." And we said, "Well, next one we can sort that out." So the one next actually had a bit of animation in it, and he got 18. So we invented the film certificate. We were the first on the planet. We were the pioneers of that, and it was purely for a marketing thing.
Yeah.
And everybody got air-rated about it, which was the whole point. So it was a troll, and everybody got upset about it, which was the whole point, which is why we sold a lot. And they would say things like, "Oh, censorship and all that stuff," and we say, "Well, it's not censored. This is and oh, it's horrible." And then I said, "No, it's a certificate of it's like an endorsement by the government.
Mm.
The government says it's okay for people over 15 to look at this. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine for adults to look at it. Over 18, it's fine. It's a certificate of endorsement." Which was a troll, of course, and which was the whole point. And so we had a stable platform to
Mm.
publish a product, which the technical side of it was quite cheap. We could focus on the quality, not that we did, but we just trusted in our authors to worry about the quality. And people like Sir Bride showed up, who were wildly wild. And then there was Fergus McNeil, when he was cool and groovy and famous. And we had Rod Pike and his horror stuff. So it all kind of came together, and we had a good purple patch then. But then we fell off the world when we did a deal with a company who will remain nameless, that tried to kill us, when succeeded, actually.
So can I just interrupt you there? Sorry. So is it true that Fergus sent one of his games in before you approached him, and it was turned down, and then later you approached him and said, "Oh, wait a minute, might have made a mistake there."
No, I think I saw Board of the Rings.
Yeah.
I think I saw that in a magazine, and everyone was writing how great this was. And he was, 3 weeks old at the time. And so we said, why don't you do that properly? Why don't we do it properly for you? And then
Mm.
we made a mistake of giving it away to Silversoft on the basis that we were rescuing them, and they were worthwhile rescuing, which they turned out not to be. So really, I suppose I was always trying to, do a sort of Howard Hughes and build a
Yeah.
huge corporation of all the big studio, RKO and all that. I was trying to get hold of all these people, and that with a little bit of, my genius, as they say in Portugal, that I could help them out. But
Yeah.
we turned out I was just pouring my money down their rat hole.
So did you also buy Quicksilver, the IP.
Yeah, well, we bailed them out.
Yeah.
I didn't buy all of it. We bailed them. I can't remember what percentage. 40% in mine, maybe 60%. But the people there were only going one way, and it was down. And they got a bit upset with me, suggesting that they were going to go bust much faster than was necessary, and maybe they might do it a different way, and that might mean they might actually survive.
Yeah.
And having helped them out and rescued them and put a lot of effort in there, they got quite upset with me. And then I just went, oh, what's the phrase? I went, screw you, and off they went and vaporized.
So what
I
happened
think
is,
I think I think they I think I nearly got punched at some stage, as I recall, or at
right,
least I got threatened with being punched because they were being such a bunch of muppets that they were getting upset with me, suggesting that there was other ways of doing it rather than going bust spontaneously.
could you give us more details about the Silversoft stuff as well? So what happened there exactly?
Well, they'd already done their good stuff. There was three partners, and
Yeah.
then there were one. Yeah, so there were two partners. A third joined. The first two left.
Hmm.
Were encouraged to leave by the late joiner, and then they failed. And there was one guy called Dougie Burns, which was the joke, which is Dougie Burns if you pour petrol on him. And there was another guy who was the found, David Patterson.
Right.
And David Patterson, he was a bright guy,
Hmm.
but he fell in amongst thieves,
Right.
or not, as the case may be. But the group of partners didn't actually gel, and that was it. And I was 19, 20. So I see this really good brand that had all this really good stuff and had a really good brand, you know, about to tip into the ocean. And I went up there and said, oh, do you need a hand? I've got a bit of money. Maybe I can help. Fools rush in.
Well, I can see why. It's because at the time they were established brands, weren't they? Both of them, and I mean, they were really good names. I mean, I remember a lot of games that they made that were really good. So I can see why people would want to do that. When you try to rescue them.
I don't know what you do. I mean, the textbook way of doing it, if you're a venture capital, you go in there, kick the management out, take the brand, and publish a load of similar games under it. And then you'd make some money, maybe survive. But the ultimate answer to the whole conundrum was to have distribution. And if you didn't have distribution, you weren't long for the world. If you look for France, Ubisoft distribution, yeah, Ocean, US Gold, Centresoft.
Yeah.
That was the trick. And then if you had the distribution, you could go to America, sign up a load of games, bring them over, and then fill the world with American stuff, and prosper. In
Hmm.
in Germany, it was Rushware, and they had a big publishing arm. But you don't have the distribution, you can't get it into retail. And if you can't get it into retail, you're dead. I actually started a computer shop at one stage further on down the line, and we were just selling our stuff like by the bucket load,
Hmm.
absolute bucket load. And I thought, well, I can't get arrested through distribution. And here I am with a little retail store in a nowhere town, in a nowhere place, and I'm selling literally hundreds of copies of our games here. And the answer would have been to open up a whole load of retailers, because you could people like Game had a fantastic model. They'd buy a out of town retail outfit, retail shop that was cheap. They'd put a barely legal to employ person there with a book, and they would ship the stuff in, and most of it would be budget. I mean, old first line games that were now going to be selling at budget price.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they'd have the little person there with a book and writing in all the sales, and they'll probably totaling up the till at the end of the day, and costs,
Hmm.
and that was a great business for them. And then along came cartridges, and it all got a bit more wicked and vicious.
So what brought the end to CRL then? Was it the jump to console stuff?
It got into a corporate mess with a corporate distribution deal, and
Right.
it all um, ended unhappily.
Right.
And the company involved is still listed in a multi-billion-pound business, and I'm not going to say rude things about them. It was a long time ago, and I mean, we took a risk
Hmm.
in that the way the market was going, it was always going to be hard, and we tried to we tried to push more product into the channel by going to distributors and saying, if you buy this amount of our releases, you can be our distributor. If not, you can't. Like the watch people do these days. And they all signed up for it, and then they all got together and went, we can't have that, because if everybody does this, we're screwed. So
Yeah.
they then kind of semi-blockaded us because we had actually, pushed terms on us.
Yeah.
And then we had an opportunity to do a distribution deal for all our stuff with a big American player who was coming to town. But they came to town, it didn't work out for them. And the best way for them to go forward was to lose those relationships. And we were that relationship that were lost. And of those relationships that they had, the only one to survive was Ubisoft. Everybody else went instantaneously bust.
Right.
Because you cut all your distribution ties to go through an exclusive deal. And when the exclusive people say, oh no, talk to our lawyers, that's it. You're gone. And
Right.
they were all gone. And that was the end of it. So we then started online, and we bought up all the rights and all the licenses from that mess. And then we did some more games. We did some ST games. Then we did online stuff. And then we did massively multiplayer games. We were pioneers in that. And then we took that onto the dot-com boom. And then we took that through the dot-com boom. And then we became a blockchain company. And that's it.
You sort of gone back to your roots, haven't you? Because you've written a lot of books.
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to. I'd always been writing books, but I hadn't been publishing them. And it's annoying to be a publisher and not be able to get your work published.
Right.
And I'd worked on it, and then I found a publisher, and they published it, and I wrote 5 or 6 books. And I've written financial books as well, so about 14 books, but 5 rollicking action thrillers, and they're out there, and they're under my name, so that people can get them. A couple of them are basically very retro, early 80s thrillers, and then there's some sort of post 2000 thrillers out there, which the Jim Evans series, so called, and it's interesting because smart men love my books.
I love the books.
You love it. You're obviously a smart man. If you're not a smart guy, you're going to hate them.
Well, I love the Armageddon trade because that was quite clever, wasn't it? It was it had the shares, the stock of shares industry, and how it would lead to strife, let's say, in the world. You're quite an investor yourself these days. How did you get that?
I started. Online became a incubator, and we incubated a financial website.
Right.
And I put all my money into the financial website in terms of stocks and shares, so that we could build something that was good for me to make money with the money that I'd put in stocks and shares. So basically, as the Americans say, skin in the game, So I put my skin in the game and built the site to actually enable me to make money in stocks and shares. I come from a background of commodity speculation. So I'd been around that when I was a really young child. I mean, like 6 and 7. I'd seen commodity trading in the early 70s, 10. Sorry, I'm exaggerating. 71, yeah. 8, 9, 10, that sort of time, 11, 12. And then started this information website for private investors, and then built it to actually try to give me an edge in the market over anybody not using the site. Because obviously, if you use the site and you win, you're going to come to the site and use it, and you're going to draw more and more people in and all that stuff. So in that much, it was very successful. So I don't know why I've been writing a lot, because I was writing a financial section for Wired magazine. So I designed this multi-dimensional visualization tool that, in fact, NASA picked up and was using, and I was actually promoting it on their site as a great thing. Which is kind of cool, NASA. And so we used the data to visualize it, and then I got writing for Wired, and I would do these funky images. This is around 2000, when money was funky in the .com, before the bot fell out of it, and all of a sudden they didn't want to be talking about money anymore. But for about a year, I did these financial models and financial coverage for Wired, and so I then started to write for the financial end of things, people like Forbes I've written
Mm.
for 25 years, but it was to promote the financial side, you see,
Yeah.
all that cross promotional stuff. And if you're good at investing, you make a lot of money.
Mm.
If you're not good at it, you lose your shirt. But if you've got good tools,
Mm.
you've got access to great data, and you're actually building tools to invest with, and then you make them available for everybody else. You're amazed how many people don't want to use tools that make you money in the stock market. It's quite bizarre, but never mind. And so obviously I became better and better and better and better at that.
Mm.
And here I am living in Monaco.
Have you got any regrets?
Yeah, I'm old. I could use being young again.
Yeah, I feel that as well, mate. I feel that.